Hey everyone, Lunatic Fringe here. Big surprise, I'm not dead. I know I haven't been uploading very much. I'm still around. I've just had a lot of issues going on. I've been working a lot. I've been trying to spend more time with my girlfriend. I've been trying to, and I actually had a bunch of computer issues at the same time. Still working on getting some content out. Still working on getting out some more Let's Play stuff. I finally got most of my computer fixed. I should be doing that more often now. Maybe trying to get back into my regular upload schedule again. Always seems to be this time of the year when my upload schedule goes all over the place. But today I'm just going to do a little thing. I also have a Skyrim video coming up where I just kind of talk for an hour and a half. Like I just ramble about Skyrim, so I hope you enjoy that. But this is something a little bit different. I'm writing. I actually wrote this, and I actually wrote this down, and I'm reading this off. This is just something that I kind of wanted to see if I can do something to see if I'm able to handle that kind of format a bit better and see if I can actually kind of make in-depth commentary on YouTube through that kind of stuff. So, as you know, this relates to the women's versus tropes in video games controversy that's going on right now, and I appreciate any kind of criticism you can throw at it, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So, without further ado, here we go. For those of you that have been avoiding the California gold rush-like boom of Kickstarter after Tim Schafer's project brought in an ungodly amount of money, let me fill you in. Kickstarter has gone from a minimalist, finger quotes, hipster project starter raking in fairly small amounts of money to a full-blown industry. After Schafer's initial project, developers and the like jumped at the opportunity for fan-funded projects, including Brian Fargo's Wasteland 2, a game sequel for a series that had disappeared in the video game market over 20 years ago. Kickstarter is an environment of idea-driven content backed by small-time investment that has been thrown directly into the internet culture maelstrom in a short period of a few months. Now, the project I'd like to talk about is one that has created an insane amount of back-and-forth debate, most of which was entirely inane. In May of this year, a Kickstarter project entitled Tropes vs. Women in Video Games emerged by one Anita Sarkeesian, who I apologize to if I spend this entire video mispronouncing her name, a self-styled feminist critic of popular culture. The project would consist of a series of YouTube videos discussing common female stereotypes in video games, very similar to other work she has done on other pop culture. Said project's funding goal was a mere $6,000. Easily raising that amount, the project's funding began to skyrocket rapidly, and that's when the internet shitstorm emerged. Before I go any further, I'd like to qualify a few things. Firstly, this video will mainly avoid the actual content of the upcoming project to focus on the discourse and narrative that has been constructed around the project. That's not to say I won't criticize the content of Sarkeesian's work. Ha, God no. I've got plenty of things to say on that. But the main issue I will touch upon is how quickly this discussion on the project has devolved into an us versus them argument, where rational inquiry and thought has quickly been replaced by inane bickering and victimization. I know, an internet discussion devolving into childish strawmanning? That never happens. Secondly, I'd like to clarify my own views on the subject of gender in video games and this project so you can understand my position before someone calls me a sexist or a feminazi in the spirit of debate. In regards to the actual creation of the video series, I don't have a problem with it at all. Some of the funding I do have problems with, and I'll get to that later. On women and troping in video games, I will say this. Yes, women are not largely represented in a positive light in video games, nor are they typically given well-developed characterization. But the same applies to men in video games. Both genders suffer from constant stereotyping reinforced by a market where character development is easily pushed aside as less important than concepts like gameplay or graphics. The game industry's focus on replicating the success of the movie industry has also helped to drive this point home, with characters being more and more Hollywoodified into certain stereotypes, which I might talk about sometime in the future. Male stereotypes do have an advantage in one regard, however. The market also typically reflects on the consumer, with the base of it, 14 to 25-year-old single males, largely aiming for some kind of power fantasy. But because of the nature of these power fantasies, poorly constructed alpha male characters are often given a free pass by many gamers due to simple self-insertion. If we look at the best-selling games of 2011, for example, we find that 3 of the titles, Battlefield 3, Black Ops, and Modern Warfare 3, have main characters who are typically American, jingoistic, alpha male mass murderer types, who are hardly a positive representation of men, and instead present a stereotypical soldier blindly following orders or ignoring the overall consequences of their actions. Obviously, I'm not saying that women aren't stereotyped. What I'm saying is that empty gender stereotypes go both ways. Overall, the lack of decent character development in games is actually a genderless issue, with its root cause being the generally poor writing in video games and its second-class nature as a game concept. On the other hand, I will say that I personally don't see Miss Sarkeesian's work as something that is finger-quote worthy of the amount of money she has raised. Her channel, Feminist Frequency, mainly deals with feminist criticism of popular culture. The problem is she's not very good at it. Her major series, Women vs. Tropes, can be recreated without much trouble. First, find a character in media, then go on to TV tropes and classify them based on their, well, trope. Say, this is a trope, and then vaguely hint at some kind of deconstruction that is basically a horribly dumbed-down analysis based on feminist discourse from 2 decades ago, taken from Hilary Lips's Gender Role Socialization, Lessons in Femininity, or Susan Douglas's Where the Girls Are, which is actually a really good book, and I suggest people read it. Sarkeesian also has the habit of avoiding research like the plague and failing to properly contextualize examples she gives. Her criticism of the use of femme fatale in the Powerpuff Girls as a straw man feminist trope, for example, fails to properly contextualize the character in the episode. Namely, that femme fatale is meant to be a criticism of radical feminists, the Andrea Dworkin and the Mary Daly types who believe that women are better than men. The episode actually ends up reinforcing the moral message that the ultimate goal of gender equality is a worthwhile one, but apparently that either flew over Miss Sarkeesian's head, or she deliberately misinterpreted it to fit her narrative. Whether it was done out of ignorance or bias is irrelevant because it's simply an example to show how her analysis fails to be grounded in reality. Ultimately, the word I'd use to describe her work would probably be lazy, and something that should be improved rather than funded. But I am a capitalist through and through, so if there is a market for Sarkeesian's work, I see no need to rain on these people's parade, and holy shit, 160 grand! Well, that was a bit of a surprise. Which brings us to the crux of the matter, the discourse and narrative surrounding the Women's vs. Tropes in video game project. Her YouTube video was awash with sexist remarks and people generally being assholes. This has caused both mainstream video game journalists and Miss Sarkeesian herself to portray her as a martyr, standing up for women in a battle against the dreaded race known as gamers and their attempt to enforce a phallocracy, and all that blah blah blah. But let's first take a look at how much controversy has been constructed to do nothing but breed controversy. Somebody, and I'm not saying it was Miss Sarkeesian, in fact it was much more likely some of her supporters, spammed 4chan with posts about her project. 4chan. The internet's hive of scum and villainy, the place filled with misogyny and general insanity. This is one of those cases where you poke a hornet's nest and you know what is going to happen. Now, one can see the suspicious nature of this. Namely, I'd argue that someone deliberately sicked 4chan on the project in order to portray it as more sympathetic. Suddenly after this, games journalism was abuzz with the project, constructing the narrative of the lone crusader for gender justice against the horde of unwashed, sexist gamer, which Miss Sarkeesian embraced. Her donations also increased rapidly as more and more people became aware of the project. Now the debate has devolved into inane sexist tripe on one side and victimization complexes on the other. Sane and rational critics, who cite the lackluster quality of her previous work, are drowned out and labeled as part of the mean-spirited sexist trolls, rendering her immune to criticism. Some have pointed out her violation of copyright law with the use of Nintendo-owned images as giveaways for donations, effectively making it a case of her selling goods licensed by a company. Although I will say I personally see the nature of Kickstarter and copyright laws as something that would produce a form of legal conflict. If anything, there would be a legal debate over this issue, and I doubt it would be so cut and dry. Others have cited the obscene amount of money she has raised for the project, and asked what she will do with it. To her credit, Miss Sarkeesian has detailed several times in her updates what further funding will do to improve the project. Although I would still criticize her for offering up a video on positive examples of females in video games as something extra when it's really something she should have included from the start. However, since the backlash has occurred, these updates have disappeared, with Miss Sarkeesian instead riding the victimization train for as long as she can. This worries me. Her last update goal was capped at $26,000, and as of this recording, her funding is over 6 times that. At the $20,000 mark, she cited upping her production quality as something she would be investing in, a worthy goal. Now if only she upped her research quality as well. Yet beyond that there has been nothing. I can see where the critics are coming from, and I would also personally like to see her offer up a more detailed project investment goal, now that her funds are so high. Suggestions I would put forward would include using the money to fund interviews with video game developers, particularly female developers, on the nature of gender in video games, or using the funding from the initial update goals and then giving the rest to a charity that benefits women, such as breast cancer charities, V-Day, an organization dedicated to ending violence against women, or Polaris Project, which deals with human trafficking. Ultimately, all I would like to see is where the money is going if she's just going to spend it on a series of 10-minute YouTube videos. If it's going to charity, great. If it's going to improve the quality of her show and expand it greatly, that's also good. But if she's simply going to pocket the money, then we have a problem. With the way that this controversy was constructed and the fact that it has created such a surge in donations, Ms. Sarkeesian needs to be very transparent with her funds, and she has failed to do so. It is my hope that she will release more information on her funding sometime in the near future, but as of now, any discourse around the project is dumbed down to the level of inane strawman. Anyone who criticizes her is a sexist, and anyone who supports her is a feminazi. This discourse is incredibly damaging because it undermines the rational criticism and support of her work in favor of lowest common denominator debates. There are criticisms that should be answered by Ms. Sarkeesian, but she has chosen to follow a narrative that paints her as virtuous. If you want to make some justifiable criticism against her work, do so in a rational and sane manner. Putting down the torches and pitchforks and making some valid points on how she has failed to offer up the whole story is the best approach. Although it's more than likely we've already cast the die and crossed the Rubicon of civil discussion. We've already devolved into sexism and victimization, some of which was carefully constructed, and I doubt we can pull ourselves out. I know that it's asking a lot of the internet, the collective id of the human race, to maintain a little rationality. But there are some legitimate criticisms of Anita Sarkeesian that are barely being touched upon due to how immaturely both sides have chosen to handle the debate, namely through the construction of back-padding narratives that support their own causes. I eagerly await being called a sexist pig in the comments.